A racist principal humiliates a black teacher, unaware of who the superintendent is. Nina Reyes walked into Lincoln High School with a sense of purpose, her heart beating with excitement. The sun streamed through the large windows, casting a warm glow on the vibrant posters that adorned the hallways, each one a testament to the diversity of the student body. Nina had always believed that education was a powerful tool for change, and her mission was to inspire her students to understand their histories, recognize their potential, and challenge the status quo. As she made her way to her classroom, Nina greeted her students with a bright smile. "Good morning, everyone. Today we're diving into the civil rights movement. I want each of you to think about what it means to fight for justice in your own lives." The students settled into their seats, some still groggy from the early hour, but Nina's enthusiasm was infectious. She began her lesson with a captivating story about Rosa Parks, weaving in personal anecdotes and encouraging her students to share their thoughts. The classroom buzzed with energy, the students engaging in spirited discussions. It was moments like these that fueled Nina's passion for teaching. She knew that she was making a difference. However, as the bell rang, signaling the end of the period, Nina felt a twinge of unease. Today was the day of the monthly faculty meeting, and she could sense a shift in the air. Graham Blackwood, the principal, had been increasingly critical of her teaching methods. His disdain for her progressive approach was palpable, and she braced herself for the confrontation she feared was inevitable. As the faculty gathered in the conference room, Nina took a seat at the back, hoping to blend into the background. The room was filled with the usual suspects, teachers chatting quietly, some reviewing their notes, while others exchanged knowing glances. Graham stood at the front, exuding an air of authority that commanded attention. "Thank you for coming, everyone," Graham began, his voice booming. "Today, I want to discuss our curriculum and some of the teaching methods that have been adopted this year." He paused, scanning the room with a scrutinizing gaze. "I've noticed that some of you, particularly in the social studies department, have strayed from our established guidelines." Nina's heart sank as she felt the weight of his words. She had poured her heart and soul into her lessons, believing that engaging students meant breaking away from the rigid structures that often stifled creativity. But Graham didn't see it that way. He saw her innovative methods as a threat to the traditional values he held dear. "Let's address the elephant in the room," Graham continued, his eyes locking onto Nina. "Nina Reyes, you've been teaching your classes in a way that's frankly inappropriate for our students. Your lessons are too complex, too rooted in contemporary issues. History is best understood in a straightforward manner. Perhaps if you simplified your teaching style, you might actually reach these kids." Laughter erupted from a few faculty members, a chorus of smirks and chuckles that made Nina's cheeks flush with embarrassment. She felt exposed, like a target in a shooting gallery. She clenched her fists, fighting the urge to retaliate, to shout that her students were more than capable of understanding complex ideas. Instead, she forced herself to remain calm. "Graham," Nina began, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside, "I believe that engaging students in discussions about contemporary issues is essential. It helps them connect with history and understand its relevance to their lives today." Graham waved her off, his tone dismissive. "That's not how we do things here, Nina. We have a standard to uphold, and your methods are undermining that standard. I suggest you reconsider your approach." The laughter continued, and Nina felt her stomach twist. She was used to being the only black teacher in the history department, but today the isolation felt heavier than ever. Was it her race, her passion? Did Graham see her as less competent because of who she was? The questions flooded her mind, but she pushed them aside. She would not let him win. As the meeting progressed, Nina struggled to focus. She was aware of the sideways glances from her colleagues, some of whom looked uncomfortable, while others appeared to revel in Graham's tirade. It was clear that some faculty members were aligned with Graham's traditionalist views, while others, like her, believed in a more dynamic approach to teaching. The divide was evident, but Nina felt an overwhelming desire to bridge that gap. Finally, the meeting came to a close, and Nina stood up, ready to leave the room. As she walked toward the door, she felt Graham's eyes on her, a predatory glare that sent shivers down her spine. She took a deep breath, determined not to let him see her weakness. "Before you go, Nina," Graham called out, his tone dripping with condescension, I'd like you to remember that teaching is a responsibility, not a privilege. Don't forget who's in charge here." Nina stopped in her tracks, her heart racing. She turned to face him, her voice steady. "I won't forget, Graham, but I also won't let you dictate how I teach. My students deserve better." With that, she walked out of the conference room, her heart pounding in her chest. The hallway felt like a refuge as she stepped away from the toxic atmosphere. She needed to gather her thoughts, to process what had just happened. But more than anything, she felt the weight of a decision settling upon her. She would not allow Graham's humiliation to define her. In the days that followed, Nina poured herself into her work. She spent hours planning innovative lessons, determined to create an environment where her students could thrive. But the shadow of Graham's words lingered, and she knew she had to confront him, not just for herself, but for her students who deserved a teacher willing to fight for their education. One afternoon, Nina decided to confide in her mentor, Tristan Hayes. He had been a guiding force in her life, always encouraging her to stand up for her beliefs. As she sat in his office, the familiar scent of books and coffee surrounded her, providing a sense of comfort. "Tristan, I don't know how much longer I can take this," Nina admitted, her voice trembling. "Graham is making it impossible for me to teach the way I believe is right. He's belittling my methods and, honestly, my identity." Tristan leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Nina, you have to document everything. His behavior is unacceptable, and you shouldn't have to endure that kind of treatment. You need to gather evidence and consider filing a formal complaint." Nina nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. "You're right. I can't let him intimidate me any longer. I'll start talking to other teachers and see if they've had similar experiences." "Good," Tristan replied, his eyes filled with encouragement. "You're not alone in this. If we gather enough evidence, it could lead to real change in the school." With renewed determination, Nina left Tristan's office, ready to take action. She knew that confronting Graham would be difficult, but she was committed to advocating for herself and her students. The next day, she began reaching out to her colleagues, asking them about their experiences with Graham and whether they felt comfortable sharing their stories. As she started gathering testimonies, Nina discovered that she wasn't alone. Many teachers expressed their discomfort with Graham's management style and the climate of fear he had created. The more she listened, the more she realized that the problem was systemic, rooted in a culture that prioritized conformity over creativity. But it was the students who ultimately gave Nina the courage to move forward. During lunch one day, a group of her students approached her, their faces serious. "Ms. Reyes, we've been talking," one of them, a bright young woman named Kayla, said. "We don't like how Mr. Blackwood talks about you. You're our favorite teacher, and we want you to know that we've got your back." Nina felt a rush of gratitude. "Thank you, Kayla. It means the world to me to hear that. But we need to do more than just talk. We need to make our voices heard." With the support of her students, Nina began organizing a small protest to advocate for more inclusive teaching practices at Lincoln High. They crafted signs and prepared speeches, determined to present their case to the school administration. The prospect of standing up to Graham filled Nina with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. As the day of the protest approached, Nina felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. She knew she was entering a battle that would require every ounce of courage she had, but she also felt a growing sense of hope. This was not just about her, it was about creating a better environment for everyone at Lincoln High. In the back of her mind, however, the shadow of Graham loomed large. She had no doubt that he would retaliate, that he would attempt to undermine her efforts. But Nina was ready. She would not back down. She would fight for her right to teach and for the rights of her students. The day of the protest dawned bright and clear, the sun illuminating Lincoln High School with an almost celebratory glow. Nina Reyes stood at the front of her classroom, her heart racing with anticipation. Students filed in, some clutching handmade signs that read, "Teach us, don't stereotype us, and history matters." A wave of pride surged through Nina as she watched her students rally around a cause that mattered deeply to them. "All right, everyone," Nina said, raising her hands to grab their attention. "Today is about making our voices heard. Remember, we're advocating for a more inclusive curriculum and fighting against the narrow-mindedness we've faced. Let's be passionate but respectful." The students nodded, their expressions a mix of excitement and determination. As they gathered their materials and prepared to head outside, Nina felt a sense of solidarity that she hadn't experienced before. This wasn't just about her, it was about the future of their education, a chance to create change. As the bell rang, signaling the end of the first period, Nina and her students made their way outside. The school courtyard was already filling with students from other classes, many of whom had heard about the protest and decided to join in. Nina's heart swelled with hope as she saw the diverse faces of her students and their allies standing together. "Look at this turnout," Kayla exclaimed, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "We're really doing this, Ms. Reyes." "Yes, we are," Nina replied, her voice catching with emotion. "This is your moment to shine, to show the administration that we won't be silenced." As the crowd began to gather, Nina took a moment to survey the scene. Students of all backgrounds had come together, united in their desire for change. The energy was electric, and Nina felt an overwhelming sense of pride in her students. They had taken a stand, and she was there to support them every step of the way. Just as they were about to start the rally, Nina spotted Graham Blackwood crossing the courtyard, flanked by a couple of teachers who appeared to be his loyalists. He wore an expression that was equal parts disdain and irritation, and Nina's heart sank at the sight of him. She knew he would not take this protest lightly. "Everyone, stay focused," Nina reminded her students, trying to keep their spirits high despite the looming threat of Graham. "We're here to make a statement, not to provoke. Let's keep it peaceful." As the protest began, Nina stepped forward to address the crowd. "Thank you all for being here today," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We are gathered to advocate for an inclusive curriculum that reflects the diverse experiences of all our students. Education should empower us, not limit us." Cheers erupted from the crowd, and the energy surged. Nina could see Graham standing off to the side, arms crossed and the lips pressed into a thin line. His presence was intimidating, but she pushed the fear aside. This was about more than one man's ego. This was about the future of education at Lincoln High. As the students began chanting slogans and waving their signs, the atmosphere transformed into one of solidarity and hope. Nina felt a rush of adrenaline as she joined her students in the chants, their voices rising in unison. "Teach us, don't stereotype us. History matters." But just as the momentum seemed to build, Graham stepped forward, his voice cutting through the cheers like a knife. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his tone authoritative. "This is completely inappropriate." The crowd fell silent, and Nina's heart raced. "We're advocating for change, Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Students deserve to learn in an environment that values their diverse experiences." Graham's expression hardened. "This is a school, not a soapbox for your misguided agenda. You are undermining the authority of this institution. I expect all of you to return to your classrooms immediately." A murmur ran through the crowd, and Nina could see the doubt creeping into her students' faces. They had come so far, and she refused to let Graham's intimidation tactics derail their efforts. "This is our school," she replied, her voice rising again. "We have the right to express our beliefs and advocate for a better education." Graham stepped closer, his demeanor shifting from authoritative to aggressive. "You're crossing a line, Nina. I won't tolerate this kind of insubordination. You're setting a terrible example for your students." Before Nina could respond, a voice rang out from the crowd. "We're not going to let him silence us." It was Kayla, emboldened by the support of her peers. "We deserve to learn about our history, not just what's in the textbook." The crowd erupted into cheers again, and Nina felt a swell of pride. Her students were standing firm, refusing to back down in the face of Graham's threats. It was a powerful moment, one that would stick with her for a long time. Graham's face flushed with anger as he glanced around, realizing that he was losing control of the situation. "Enough!" he shouted, trying to regain authority. "If you don't disperse immediately, I will take disciplinary action against all of you." Nina took a step forward, standing tall despite the fear coursing through her. "You can't intimidate us into silence, Mr. Blackwood. We will not back down. We will fight for our right to learn." The tension in the air was palpable, and for a moment it felt as if the world had come to a standstill. Nina could see the determination in her students' eyes, and she knew they were ready to face whatever consequences might come their way. This was their moment, and they would seize it together. Just then, the sound of sirens broke through the tension, and Nina's heart sank. She looked up to see the flashing lights of a police car pulling into the school parking lot. What's happening? She wondered, anxiety gripping her. Were they really going to call the police on a peaceful protest? As the officers stepped out of the vehicle, Nina's thoughts spiraled. She felt a rush of adrenaline, knowing that the stakes had just risen dramatically. This was no longer just about her or her students. This was about the systemic issues that had plagued their school for far too long. Graham approached the officers, speaking in hushed tones, and Nina felt her pulse quicken. She couldn't let this moment slip away. "Everyone, stay strong," she called out to her students, her voice cutting through the noise. "We're doing this together." The officers approached, and one of them, a tall woman with a calm demeanor, stepped forward. "We've been called here to address a disturbance," she said, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "What's going on?" Nina took a breath, stepping forward to address the officer. "We're exercising our right to protest for a more inclusive curriculum. We're advocating for ourselves in our education." The officer nodded, her expression softened. "As long as you're peaceful, you're within your rights to protest. Just be mindful of the traffic and keep the area clear." Nina felt a wave of relief wash over her. They were being heard. The officer's presence seemed to empower the students, reinvigorating their spirits. They cheered, their chants echoing through the courtyard once more. Graham, seeing the tide turning against him, stepped back, frustration etched across his face. For the first time, it seemed that his authority was being challenged. Nina seized the moment, rallying her students once more. "This is our school. Our voices matter. Together we can create change." As the protest continued, Nina felt a renewed sense of hope. She knew that the fight was far from over, but today had shown her the power of unity and resilience. Together, they were creating a movement, and there was no turning back now. The protest had been both exhilarating and exhausting for Nina Reyes. The energy from her students fueled her, but as she sat in her classroom the next day, she felt the weight of the previous day's events pressing heavily on her shoulders. The atmosphere at Lincoln High School had shifted. Whispers filled the hallways, and many students approached her with expressions of support. However, the tension with Graham Blackwood lingered like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. Nina opened her laptop and began drafting an email to her mentor, Tristan Hayes. She needed guidance on how to proceed. After the protest, she had felt empowered, but now the uncertainty of what lay ahead filled her with apprehension. She typed quickly, explaining the events of the protest, the police presence, and Graham's threats. "Tristan," she wrote, "the protest was a success, but I fear Graham will retaliate. I need your advice on how to document everything and what steps I should take next. I can't let this go unchallenged, but I also don't want to put myself in jeopardy." After sending the email, Nina took a deep breath. She needed to be strategic. The moment she stepped out of her classroom, she would need to confront whatever fallout would come from Graham's retaliation. She could already envision him plotting his next move, fueled by a need to reassert his authority. Later that day, Nina decided to reach out to some of her colleagues, hoping to gather their experiences with Graham. She approached a few teachers during lunch, each conversation fraught with tension and uncertainty. Some were hesitant to speak out, fearing repercussions, while others expressed their frustrations, revealing that they too had felt the sting of Graham's condescension. "His management style is stifling," said one teacher, a middle-aged man named Mark. "I've seen him belittle staff members in front of students. It's demoralizing." Nina nodded, feeling a sense of solidarity amidst the shared frustrations. "We need to document this. If we can gather enough evidence, maybe we can hold him accountable." "Easier said than done," Mark replied, glancing around nervously. "I have a family to think about. I can't risk my job over this." Nina understood his fears, but felt the urgency of their situation. But we can't let fear dictate our actions. If we don't stand up now, things will never change. The conversation shifted as other teachers joined in, expressing their own experiences with Graham's leadership. Each story added to the growing mosaic of discontent, and for every hesitant voice, there was another ready to speak up. By the end of lunch, Nina had gathered a handful of testimonies, and with each new account, her resolve strengthened. That evening, Nina stayed late at school, sitting at her desk with a stack of papers spread out before her. She began compiling the testimonies and her own experiences, creating a document that detailed the instances of Graham's discriminatory behavior. She knew that if she wanted to confront him, She needed to present a united front, backed by evidence. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Tristan, and she opened it eagerly. "Nina," it read, "I'm proud of you for standing up. Gathering evidence is crucial. Document everything. If you can get a few more colleagues on board, we can consider filing a formal complaint. Remember, you're not alone in this." Nina felt a surge of hope as she read his words. She was determined to create a safe and supportive environment for her students and fellow teachers. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that this fight was about more than just her. It was about changing the culture of the entire school. The following day, Nina approached her students with her plan. "I want to talk to you all about what happened yesterday. I know it was a lot, but I think it's important for us to keep the momentum going." The students gathered around, their expressions a mix of concern and eagerness. Kayla was among them, her eyes bright with determination. "What do you want us to do, Ms. Reyes?" "I want us to keep advocating for an inclusive curriculum," Nina said. "But I also want to make sure that we're prepared for any backlash from Graham. We need to document everything. If any of you feel comfortable sharing your experiences, it could help us build a case." The students listened intently as Nina explained her plan to gather testimonies from both students and staff. To her relief, they were enthusiastic and ready to help. They began discussing their own experiences, sharing stories of how Graham's comments had affected their learning environment. "I can talk to my friends in the other classes," Kayla suggested. "They've seen how he treats teachers too. We can get more people involved." Nina felt a swell of pride as she watched her students rally together, their determination shining through. "This is how we create change," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "We stand together, and we don't back down." As they brainstormed ideas, Nina's phone buzzed again. It was a text from Tristan, suggesting they meet to discuss the next steps. She agreed, knowing that she needed his insight and support now more than ever. Later that week, Nina and Tristan met at a local cafe, the aroma of coffee and pastries surrounding them as they settled into a quiet booth. "I'm glad we could meet," Nina said, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. "I've gathered some testimonies, and the students are really passionate about this." Tristan smiled, his encouraging presence calming her. "That's fantastic. It sounds like you're building a strong case, but we need to be careful. Graham won't take kindly to this." "I know," Nina replied, her brow furrowing, "but I can't let him intimidate me anymore. I've seen the impact he has on my students, and it's not right." They discussed the best approach for presenting the evidence to the school administration, as well as the potential risks involved. Nina felt a growing sense of urgency. If they were going to challenge Graham, they needed to act quickly. As they wrapped up their meeting, Tristan leaned in, his tone serious. "Nina, remember that you're doing this for the greater good. It's not just about you. It's about every teacher and student who has felt marginalized. You're a leader in this fight." Nina nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "I won't let fear dictate my actions. I'm ready to take this on." The next day, Nina gathered her students again, ready to share their plan. "We're going to compile our testimonies and present them to the administration. I want each of you to write down your experiences with Graham, whether it's something he said or how his behavior affected your learning." The students nodded, their expressions serious as they understood the magnitude of what they were about to undertake. They divided into groups, brainstorming their stories and sharing their thoughts. The classroom buzzed with a sense of determination that filled Nina with hope. As the day progressed, Nina felt the weight of their mission settle upon her. She knew that confronting Graham would not be easy, but with each passing hour, the support of her students and colleagues fortified her resolve. The tide was turning, and she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. That evening, as Nina sat at her desk compiling the testimonies, she received another message from Tristan. He had heard about the growing support for her cause and wanted to help organize a faculty meeting to discuss the issues facing the school. "Nina," the message read, "we have a chance to bring everyone together. Let's schedule a meeting and address these concerns openly. It's time for change." Nina's heart raced at the prospect. This was it, the opportunity to shine a spotlight on the systemic issues within the school and to hold Graham accountable for his actions. She quickly replied, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she agreed to the plan. As she finished compiling the testimonies, Nina felt a sense of empowerment wash over her. They were on the brink of something significant, and she was ready to lead the charge. With each testimony shared, each voice raised, They were dismantling the barriers that had held them back for too long. The following week, anticipation hung thick in the air at Lincoln High School as Nina Reyes prepared for the faculty meeting that would address the growing concerns about Principal Graham Blackwood's management style. She had sent out a notice to all staff, encouraging them to attend and voice their thoughts on the current state of the school. The response had been overwhelming. Teachers from various departments expressed their desire to share their experiences, many of them fueled by the momentum Nina had created. As the day of the meeting approached, Nina felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. She spent hours reviewing the testimonies she had gathered, ensuring that she could present them clearly and effectively. The support from her students and colleagues had been invaluable, but she knew that standing up to Graham would require every ounce of courage she possessed. On the day of the meeting, Nina arrived early, setting up the conference room with a projector and screen to display the testimonies. She arranged chairs in a circle, creating an inviting atmosphere that encouraged open dialogue. As teachers began to filter in, she greeted them warmly, feeling a sense of solidarity building among the staff. "Thank you all for coming," Nina said, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "Today we're here to discuss the climate at Lincoln High and how we can create a more inclusive and supportive environment for both students and faculty. Your voices matter, and it's time we address the issues we've been facing." The room buzzed with murmurs of agreement as more teachers took their seats. Nina felt the energy shift, a collective understanding that they were embarking on something significant together. She noticed a few familiar faces: Mark, the teacher who had shared his frustrations earlier, and a couple of others who had expressed support for her cause. As the meeting commenced, Nina began by sharing her own experiences with Graham, recounting the humiliating moments from the faculty meeting that had sparked the protest. "I believe that education should empower us, not diminish us," she said, her voice unwavering. "We need to foster an environment where all teachers feel supported in their methods, especially when those methods are aimed at engaging our students." Several teachers nodded in agreement, and Nina felt a surge of hope. "I've gathered testimonies from many of you who have faced similar challenges. I'd like to share some of those today." She clicked through her presentation, displaying quotes and anecdotes from her colleagues. As she read aloud, the room fell silent, each story resonating deeply. Teachers spoke about feeling belittled, dismissed, and unsupported under Graham's leadership. The tension in the room was palpable, but it was also charged with a sense of purpose. "Graham's management style is stifling," Mark spoke up during the discussion. "It's not just about teaching, it's about creating a culture of fear. We need to change that." Nina nodded, encouraged by his bravery. "Exactly. This isn't just about one person's behavior. It's about the systemic issues that have created an environment where teachers feel they can't speak up." The conversation continued to build momentum, with more teachers sharing their stories and frustrations. Each voice added weight to their collective narrative, and Nina felt as if they were beginning to break down the walls that had long confined them. The dynamic shifted from passive acceptance of Graham's authority to active advocacy for change. As the discussion progressed, Nina sensed a shift in the atmosphere. It was no longer just a group of discontented teachers. They were becoming a united front, ready to challenge the status quo. The room was filled with passion and determination, and for the first time in a long time, Nina felt a sense of belonging among her colleagues. However, as the meeting continued, Nina felt a twinge of anxiety as she glanced at the clock. They were running out of time, and she knew Graham would soon arrive, likely prepared to dismiss their concerns. She needed to ensure that they left the meeting with a plan. "Before we wrap up, I want to propose that we draft a formal complaint to the school administration," Nina said, her voice strong. "We have the evidence, and we have each other's support. It's time we hold Graham accountable for his actions." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, and several teachers voiced their support. "I'm in," Mark said, looking around at his colleagues. "We can't let fear keep us silent any longer." With their resolve solidified, Nina and her colleagues agreed to meet again later in the week to finalize the complaint and discuss their next steps. As the meeting concluded, Nina felt a wave of relief wash over her. They had taken a significant step toward change, and she knew that together they could make a difference. As the teachers dispersed, Nina felt a mixture of exhilaration and dread. She had led her colleagues in a discussion that challenged the very foundation of their school's culture. But Graham was still out there, waiting to retaliate. She could already envision his reaction. He would not take their defiance lightly. That evening, Nina returned home, her mind racing with thoughts of the meeting. She couldn't shake the feeling that Graham would retaliate, and she needed to be prepared for whatever he might throw her way. She sat down at her kitchen table, surrounded by her notes and the testimonies she had collected. Her phone buzzed, breaking her concentration. It was a text from Kayla, one of her most passionate students. "Ms. Reyes, we're all talking about what happened today. We want to show our support again. Can we organize another protest?" Nina's heart swelled. The students were ready to stand by her side once more, and she knew they could amplify their message. "Absolutely," she replied. "Let's do it. We need to show the administration that we're serious about this." As the days passed, the conversation at Lincoln High continued to evolve. Students began discussing their own experiences with Graham, sharing stories of feeling dismissed or disrespected in their classes. The energy was palpable as they prepared for the next protest, fueled by a determination to create change. On the day of the protest, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Students gathered in the courtyard, their signs raised high, their chants echoing through the halls. Nina stood at the forefront, her heart racing with pride as she watched her students rally together once more. "Today, we're not just advocating for ourselves," she called out to the crowd. "We're fighting for a future where every student and teacher feels valued and respected." The cheers that erupted from the crowd resonated deeply within Nina. She knew they were making an impact, but she also knew that Graham would likely see their actions as a direct challenge to his authority. She steeled herself for whatever backlash might come, reminding herself of the support she had from her colleagues and students. As the protest continued, Nina spotted Graham standing off to the side, arms crossed and jaw clenched. His presence was a stark reminder of the battle they were waging, but she refused to let fear dictate her actions. Together, they were creating a movement, and she was ready to lead. As the rally progressed, Nina felt a surge of adrenaline. They were making their voices heard, and she was determined to ensure that they would not be silenced. The fight for change had only just begun, and she was prepared to see it through to the end. The energy in the air was electric, but beneath the surface of the excitement, Nina Reyes felt a chilling weight of anxiety. The protest had energized the student body and rallied her colleagues, but she knew they were walking a tightrope. Principal Graham Blackwood was not the type to back down quietly, and she braced herself for the potential fallout. In the days following the protest, the faculty room became a hub of whispered conversations. Teachers exchanged knowing glances, and while most were supportive of Nina's efforts, a few remained wary. Graham's influence loomed large, and his reaction to the protest was anticipated with bated breath. Nina spent her evenings poring over the testimonies she had collected, organizing them into a cohesive narrative that highlighted the systemic issues within Lincoln High. Each story painted a vivid picture of the fear and intimidation that had permeated the faculty and, by extension, the student body. She was determined to present a compelling case to the administration. On a Wednesday afternoon, a few days after the protest, Nina received an unexpected email from the district office. It was an invitation to meet with Graham to discuss recent events. The words felt heavy, as if they carried an unspoken threat. Nina's heart raced as she read the email, her mind racing with possibilities. Was this meeting meant to intimidate her, or was it an opportunity to address the concerns that had been raised? She took a deep breath and replied, accepting the invitation. The meeting was scheduled for Friday morning, and she knew she had to prepare herself not only for a confrontation with Graham, but also for the possibility that he might attempt to undermine her credibility. That night, Nina sat down with Tristan Hayes to discuss the upcoming meeting. They met at a coffee shop, the aroma of roasted beans creating a comforting atmosphere as they settled into a booth. "I received an email from Graham," Nina said, her voice low. "He wants to meet to discuss everything that's been happening." Tristan raised an eyebrow, his expression serious. "You need to be cautious, Nina. Graham is not going to come into this meeting with the intent to listen. He'll likely try to discredit you." "I know," Nina replied, her determination unwavering. "But I can't let him intimidate me. I have the support of my students and colleagues behind me, and I need to speak up for what's right." Tristan nodded, his eyes filled with encouragement. "Let's prepare for the meeting. We can go over your key points in the testimonies you've gathered. You need to present a united front." As they strategized, Nina felt a surge of confidence. She had spent too long allowing Graham's behavior to go unchecked. It was time to confront him directly and demand accountability. The meeting was not just about her, it was about all the teachers and students who had suffered under Graham's management. On the morning of the meeting, Nina arrived at the district office, her heart pounding in her chest. She took a moment to gather her thoughts before stepping inside. The stark, fluorescent lighting made the space feel sterile and intimidating. As she walked down the corridor, she spotted Graham standing outside the conference room, his arms crossed, an expression unreadable. "Ms. Reyes," he greeted her with an icy tone. "Thank you for coming. I trust you're prepared for our discussion." Nina nodded, forcing herself to remain composed. "I am, Mr. Blackwood. I believe it's important that we address the concerns that have been raised." As they entered the conference room, Nina noticed a few other administrators already seated at the table. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that she wasn't alone. Her colleagues' testimonies and her students' support were with her. "Let's get started," Graham said, taking a seat at the head of the table. "I think we should address the protests that have taken place and the complaints I've received regarding your teaching methods." Nina maintained eye contact with him, refusing to let him intimidate her. "The protests were a response to the culture of fear that has been fostered under your leadership, Graham. Many teachers have expressed feeling belittled and unsupported, and it's time we address that." Graham scoffed, leaning back in his chair with a dismissive wave of his hand. "You're misinterpreting the situation. I'm trying to maintain standards, and it's clear that some staff members have lost sight of what that means. Your lesson plans, for example, are far too progressive for this institution." Nina felt her pulse quicken at his condescension. "Education should evolve with the times, Graham. My students deserve to learn about their history in a way that resonates with them, not in a way that's dictated by outdated standards." He narrowed his eyes, his tone growing sharper. "You're crossing a line, Nina. If you continue to challenge my authority, there will be consequences." Nina took a steadying breath, refusing to back down. "I'm not here to undermine your authority, but I will not tolerate being belittled or having my teaching style dismissed. This isn't just about me, it's about the students and the other teachers who feel the same way." The tension in the room escalated as the other administrators exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation unfolding before them. Graham's face reddened, and for a moment, Nina thought he might explode. Instead, he composed himself, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Let's talk about the testimonies you've gathered," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What exactly do you think these complaints will accomplish?" "I believe they will show that the environment at Lincoln High is toxic and counterproductive," Nina replied, her voice steady. "These testimonies highlight the fear and intimidation that teachers face. It's time for the administration to acknowledge that and take action." Graham leaned forward, his expression darkening. "Do you honestly think you can sway the administration with these stories? You're a new teacher with no tenure. You risk your career by challenging me." Nina clenched her jaw, fighting back the anger that threatened to boil over. "I'm willing to take that risk if it means creating a better environment for my students and my colleagues. We deserve to work in a space where we feel valued." As the conversation continued, Graham attempted to twist Nina's words, trying to portray her as a troublemaker rather than an advocate for change. He painted her passion as reckless, and with each passing moment, the tension between them grew thicker. Nina realized that Graham was not interested in a constructive dialogue. He was determined to maintain his control at all costs. She could feel the weight of the room bearing down on her, but she knew she couldn't back down now. This was a pivotal moment, not just for her, but for everyone who had faced Graham's intimidation. "Graham," Nina said, choosing her words carefully, "this isn't just about me or my teaching methods. This is about the culture you've created at Lincoln High. We can't ignore the impact it has on our students and our ability to teach effectively." He scoffed. "You think you can come in here and dictate how I run my school? This is a place of learning, not a playground for your ideas." "No, Graham," Nina shot back, her voice firm. "This is a place where we should feel safe and supported. If we can't create an inclusive culture, we're failing our students." The other administrators shifted in their seats, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating confrontation. Nina could sense that they were beginning to see the cracks in Graham's facade, and she pressed on. "I have gathered testimonials from teachers and students alike," she continued. "They deserve to have their voices heard. We can't continue to ignore their experiences. This is about accountability and transparency. Graham's expression hardened, and for a moment Nina could see the anger simmering beneath his composed exterior. "You're playing a dangerous game, Nina. I suggest you tread carefully." "I'm not afraid of you," Nina replied, her voice unwavering. "I'm standing up for what's right, and I won't let fear dictate my actions any longer." The tension in the room reached a breaking point, and the other administrators exchanged concerned glances. Nina could feel the weight of their collective gaze, and she knew she had to make her case compelling if she wanted to see real change. "Let's hear from the others," she said, gesturing toward the testimonies she had compiled. "We need to address this as a collective. This isn't just my fight. It's a fight for all of us." Graham opened his mouth to protest, but one of the administrators, a woman named Elena, interjected. "Perhaps we should take a moment to review the testimonies. It's important that we listen to the concerns being raised." Nina felt a rush of gratitude toward Elena, realizing that perhaps there was a glimmer of hope. Graham's expression soured, but Nina seized the moment. "Thank you, Elena. I believe it's crucial for everyone to hear these voices." As she began to read the testimonies aloud, Nina felt a wave of empowerment wash over her. The stories were powerful, detailing experiences of belittlement and fear that had silenced so many voices. Each account painted a vivid picture of a toxic environment that had stifled creativity and hindered learning. Graham's expression darkened further with each story shared, his discomfort palpable as the weight of accountability settled onto his shoulders. The room became charged with emotion, and Nina could sense the shift in atmosphere. The administrators were beginning to realize the extent of the problem. As she reached the final testimony, Nina looked up from her notes, meeting the gazes of the other administrators. These stories are not just complaints, they are cries for help. They highlight the urgent need for change in our school culture. We can no longer allow fear and intimidation to dictate how we teach or how we learn. The silence in the room was palpable, and Nina felt a mixture of relief and trepidation. She had laid her cards on the table, and now it was up to the administrators to respond. Graham shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his jaw clenched as he processed the weight of the testimonies. "Let's not forget," he interjected, attempting to regain control, "that these are just a few voices among many. We can't base our entire approach on a handful of complaints." Nina felt her heart race at his dismissal. "With all due respect, Graham, these aren't just isolated incidents. They reflect a broader pattern. If we don't address these concerns now, we risk fostering a culture where teachers and students feel they cannot express themselves." One of the other administrators, a man named Victor, finally spoke up. "I think we need to take these testimonies seriously. If these issues are affecting staff morale and student engagement, we have a responsibility to investigate further." Nina felt a surge of hope at Victor's words. "Exactly. I propose that we form a committee to look into these claims and to develop a plan that promotes inclusivity and support for both teachers and students." Graham's face darkened as he struggled to maintain his composure. "This is not how we handle matters in this school. I've been in this position for years, and I won't have my authority undermined by a group of disgruntled teachers." Nina stood her ground, refusing to let his threats intimidate her. "This is not about undermining your authority, Graham. It's about creating a better environment for everyone. Change is necessary for growth, and we owe it to our students to provide them with a safe and supportive learning environment." Elena nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps it would be beneficial to conduct an anonymous survey among staff and students to gather more data on the culture at Lincoln High. That way, we can address specific issues without any fear of retaliation." Graham's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Nina feared he might explode. "You're all making a grave mistake," he warned, his tone low and threatening. "If you go down this path, you will regret it." Nina took a deep breath, steadied by the support of her colleagues. "It's time for accountability, Graham. We cannot continue to ignore the experiences of those who have felt marginalized in this school. We owe it to them to initiate these discussions and seek solutions." The tension in the room escalated, and for a moment it felt as if the walls were closing in. Graham's expression was a mixture of fury and desperation, and Nina sensed that he was losing control of the situation. "Let's wait a moment to regroup," Victor suggested, sensing the rising tension. "I think it would be wise for us to consider the next steps carefully and ensure that we're making informed decisions." Nina nodded, grateful for the support. "Thank you, Victor. I appreciate your willingness to address these concerns seriously. I believe that together, we can create a plan that fosters a culture of respect and inclusivity. As they discussed the logistics of gathering data and forming a committee, Nina felt a sense of momentum building. For the first time, it seemed that the administration was willing to listen and take action. Graham, however, remained a looming presence, his body language radiating hostility. After the meeting, Nina emerged into the hallway, her heart racing with adrenaline. She had taken a significant step forward, but the battle was far from over. Graham was still a formidable opponent, and she knew he wouldn't take this lightly. As she made her way to her classroom, she was met by several teachers who had attended the meeting. "Nina, you did an incredible job in there," Mark said, a smile breaking across his face. "You stood your ground, and it was inspiring." "Absolutely," another teacher chimed in. "You gave voice to what so many of us have been feeling for years. Thank you for leading the charge." Nina felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. "I couldn't have done it without your support. We need to keep this momentum going. It's time for change at Lincoln High." As the days progressed, the atmosphere at the school shifted. Teachers began to speak more openly about their experiences, and students felt emboldened to share their concerns. The administration announced plans to conduct the anonymous survey, and the excitement was palpable. For the first time in a long while, there was a sense of hope and possibility within the walls of Lincoln High. Yet Nina knew that Graham would not remain passive. He was likely plotting his next move, and she had to be prepared for the fallout. As the survey was distributed, she felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. What would the results reveal? Would they finally shed light on the toxic environment that had permeated the school? The day the results were scheduled to be released, Nina arrived early, her heart pounding in her chest. The faculty room was abuzz with conversation, and she felt a sense of camaraderie among her colleagues. They were all in this together, ready to advocate for a better future. When the announcement finally came, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. The principal of the district, a woman named Lila Morgan, addressed the staff over the intercom. "Thank you all for your cooperation in the anonymous survey. We appreciate your honesty and commitment to improving our school environment." Nina felt a surge of hope as she listened, knowing that this was a pivotal moment. The results will be shared with the faculty in the next few days, and I encourage everyone to remain open to the feedback we receive. Change is a collective effort, and we are committed to fostering a culture of inclusivity at Lincoln High. As the announcement concluded, Nina exchanged excited glances with her colleagues. They had done it. They had initiated a conversation that could lead to real change. But as the day wore on, Nina couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Graham would retaliate. That afternoon, as she prepared to leave for the day, Nina was met by one of her students, a bright young man named Malik. He looked anxious, shifting from foot to foot as he approached her. "Ms. Reyes, can we talk for a second?" "Of course, Malik. What's on your mind?" she asked, sensing his unease. "I'm worried about what's going to happen with Mr. Blackwood," he said, his voice low. "I heard some teachers talking, and they're scared he'll come after you for standing up to him." Nina felt a knot form in her stomach. "I appreciate your concern, Malik, but I can't let fear dictate my actions. This is about all of us, and we have to stand together." "I know," Malik replied, his voice resolute, "but I just want you to be careful. You're making a difference, but I don't want anything to happen to you." Nina smiled at him, touched by his support. "Thank you, Malik. It means a lot to have you and your classmates standing with me. We're all in this together, and together, we'll make sure our voices are heard." As she walked home that evening, the weight of the day settled on her shoulders. She knew that the battle for change was only beginning, and the road ahead would be filled with challenges. But with the support of her colleagues and students, she felt more determined than ever to fight for a better future at Lincoln High. The day had finally arrived when the results of the survey would be revealed. Nina Reyes stood in front of her classroom, her heart racing with anticipation and anxiety. The atmosphere at Lincoln High was tense, and the faculty room buzzed with whispers of what the survey would reveal about Principal Graham Blackwood's leadership. As the school day progressed, the announcement echoed over the intercom, calling all faculty members to the gymnasium for a special meeting. Nina exchanged nervous glances with her colleagues, who had rallied around her in recent weeks. Together they entered the gym, the air thick with anticipation. Lila Morgan, the district principal, stood at the podium, her expression serious yet resolute. Thank you for your honesty in the recent survey. The results indicate a pressing need for change here at Lincoln High. Many staff members reported feeling unsupported and intimidated. Nina's heart soared as Lila continued. We will be implementing a series of workshops focused on inclusivity and professional development. Furthermore, we will be forming a committee to address the issues raised and ensure that every voice is heard. A wave of relief washed over the staff. They had finally been heard. As the meeting concluded, Graham sat at the back, his expression darkening. Nina felt a mix of triumph and apprehension. She knew he would not take this lightly. But as her colleagues rallied around her, she realized that they had taken a stand together, and change was finally within reach. Later that day, Nina found Malik waiting for her outside her classroom. "Ms. Reyes, we heard the news. Thank you for standing up for us." Nina smiled, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders. "This is just the beginning, Malik. Together, we've made a difference." As she walked out of the school, hand in hand with her students, Nina felt a renewed sense of hope. They had faced adversity head-on, and in doing so, they had transformed not only their school, but also their futures. You've made it to the end. If you enjoyed this story, I am confident that you'll love the next one appearing on the screen now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and please give this video a like. I'll see you in the next one.